Hi, welcome to the Worship Guitar Series on electric guitar. I'm Paul Baloche, and this is my friend Glenn Pierce, and who happens to be one of my favorite guitar players in the world, and has played on Vineyard tapes and Maranatha tapes and Integrity Music, so I feel like he's more than qualified to talk about some electric guitar concepts in the context of worship. And that's what this tape is designed for, primarily for electric guitar players that perhaps you grew up, learning all these Clapton licks and you were in club bands, or who knows what your background is, but now you find yourself in a church worship situation and you're not sure what's okay or what's not okay, or perhaps you're a worship leader and you have an electric guitarist in your group and you're wondering what to do with this guy or this gal, and you're looking for some ways, some direction to give to them and how to better utilize this. Because I feel like electric guitar is here to stay. There's no doubt about it. It's such a key part of our culture, the music of our generation, that regardless of who has a problem with it, I really, truly believe that it will be with us for a long, long time. And I'm glad about that. So this video is going to be pretty fast-paced. It's going to be relaxed. We're just going to try to move quickly so we can get a lot in. And so I hope you have your guitar handy and a pick. And we're going to cover things like effects, how to get the kind of tones that you hear on these records, and how to get those kinds of sounds, and how to use the guitar in a dynamic way. We're going to talk about how to create a palette of colors and how to make choices on different songs, how to decide whether or not to use chords or a clean sound or a dirty sound or a crunch sound, or we'll even define what those terms are if you're not familiar with those. We'll get into learning some songs. We'll also get into some soloing. So that's kind of an overview of what we're going to do. We're going to move quickly so that you can always rewind or fast forward to the part that you need to practice on the most, depending on where you're at level-wise. So let's start by tuning up.
The tuner is the most important piece of gear that any guitar player could own, because the nature of this instrument is that it will go out of tune, unlike the piano or a synthesizer or something. So you got to have a tuner, a chromatic tuner, so you don't have to necessarily switch around. The chromatic tuner helps you tune each string individually without having to change anything on the tuner. I think it's important to tune with a volume pedal so that there's no distraction in the middle of worship. I'll tune whenever I can during a set, during a song, any kind of break that I get. And I use a volume pedal that has a tuner out that goes to the tuner. When I pull back the volume pedal, it allows me to tune silently. For the purposes of the video, I'll tune the guitar right now. First is the low E string. Low E harmonic at the 12th fret. A string. Harmonic at the 12th fret. D string. G string. B string, high E string.
Okay, here we go. Tape's rolling. 1, 2, 3. Okay, in this first section, I want to talk about equipment and effects, and the type of equipment. And there's basically 3 ingredients to a great guitar sound, and that is having a good guitar, a good amp, and some quality effects. So let's talk first about a good guitar. I find sometimes guys will have a cheap guitar, and then they'll go out and buy lots and lots of effects, hoping that it'll make a cheap guitar sound good. And in my experience, it's better to do the opposite. Start off, spend your money on the best possible guitar you can afford. And, that hurts financially maybe. Maybe you don't have the money. But if you feel like this is something that you have a passion about, God's called you to play guitar, lead guitar, electric guitar, whatever, in your worship band at church, or you feel like this is a long-term thing for you, then, save a little extra. Make it hurt a little bit. Get the best quality instrument you can get, and you won't be sorry. And then later on, acquire some effects. So in terms of guitars, there's two basic types. The first type is what Glenn's playing, and that will be a Strat type guitar, coming from the original Fender Stratocaster. But now there's a lot of different variations of that. But what makes it a Strat type guitar is that it has 3 single coil pickups. And with those 3 single coil pickups, there's a lot of tone variations that you can get. So that's a little bit more versatile. The other type of guitar is more the Les Paul type guitar, whether it's Paul Reed Smith or there's several of these type of guitars. Basically, they're a heavier guitar, and they have 2 humbucker pickups. These are called humbucker pickups. Instead of being single coil, they're double coil, and it's a much fatter sound, much richer, perhaps, just fatter, nastier, would you say?
Mm-hmm.
We use that word in this video, nasty. And, kind of like the old Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, those kind of guys kind of leaned more towards this type of a tone. But once you've kind of decided on what kind of guitar you want, the next step is your amp. And again, there's basically 2 types of amps. There's tube amps or solid state. And I think, without a doubt, most guitar players prefer the tube because the tubes just have this warmth about it. It's not so brittle. Solid state can get real brittle sounding, and it's just not pleasing to the ear, whereas tubes tend to warm things up, smooth the tones out. It's much more pleasant to the ear. So once you've got your guitar and your amp, and again, don't worry about having to buy this big, huge, gigantic amp. You can even get a small, decent little tube amp. There's a lot of companies that make decent tube amps for under $500 even. And once you've got that, then the next step would be to start acquiring some effects. And I'd really like Glenn to talk about that because I know that you could have one of those refrigerator racks with all those racks in it. But Glenn, we just did a session this past week, Praise Band 10, and to me, just the tones you were getting were just killer. Just the best tones, rich tones, high soaring lead tones, clean, shimmery rhythm tones. It's all there, and yet he brought his whole effects rack in a little duffel bag, that he got off the plane with. So I'd like to know, what the secret is, to get some of the tones that you have. Can you talk about some of the effects and why you have them?
Part of it is the guitar thing, like you mentioned earlier. Find a guitar that feels good in your hands. Go to the store and just hold a guitar. Every neck will have a slightly different shape, and everybody's hands are a little different. Hold a guitar, see how it feels, because that's your initial connection to the instrument. Once you've got that together, all this gear just helps you create a sound that's in your head. And nothing against rack systems. I still use a giant, 24-space rack system, and I like that sound, but I find it mostly useful in the studio where you've got a perfect listening environment with stereo speakers. You can hear the stereo delays, you can hear the chorus, you can hear all these little nuances in the stereo field. But in the real world, most situations will have a mono PA system, and so I find that the pedals with a single amp is a great tone. And when you listen to guys like Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton and Stevie Ray Vaughan, most of their tones were made with pedals and mono amps, and I think that those were some of the greatest tones in history. So I really enjoy using these boxes into a tube amp, and I find it to be just as fun as using scads of other stuff. So I start with 3 general tones: a clean tone, a crunch tone, and a lead tone. And the clean tone is essentially the sound of the guitar straight into the amp. And the great thing about Strat is you've got 5 completely different sounds to help you create a tone out of that one sound. crunch tone is basically a clean sound with a little bit more dirt or distortion on it. This is a sound I use for just about everything because, again, with the guitar, you can manipulate the sound into any tone. And if you use your volume pedal, you can clean up the sound a little bit. The lead tone is that sound with a little bit more distortion.
Cool. Now that we've heard the different possibilities, tonal possibilities, it's important to kind of lay them out on our palette, like an artist would have sort of a palette and have all their colors handy, or a cook would have all the spices in front of them as they get ready to cook. I think it's important, especially when you're just starting out, to have one or two good clean tones, one or two good crunch tones, and one or two good lead tones. And just kind of pull from those colors for a while and get used to those sounds. The thing about an electric guitar is a lot of times it can create the difference between a verse and a chorus. A lot of times the verse of a song will be real sort of mellow, kind of gentle, and you'd use a clean sound, maybe with some chorusing. And then in comes the chorus, and you want to add some more energy or dynamics. And that's where, the crunch tone would come in. And then coming out of that chorus, if there's some kind of a solo, then there's your lead tone. So why don't we just kind of listen to a few, maybe a dry, clean tone, and then an affected clean tone, and then a dry crunch tone. Let's kind of listen to a few of those things.
One of the things I like about the Strat is it gives me 5 completely different tone selections to work from. And with any one of these sounds, I've got 5 options tonally to go with it. So on the clean sound, I can start with any one of those sounds. So if I start with a clean sound, maybe I'll add a little delay to make it smoother. And then for like the chorus section, like Paul's talking about, I'll go to a crunch sound. But what's great about this sound is that it can also be used for a lead sound. If I add delay to it, within the same pedal, and I'll go back to maybe the bridge pickup for back to the chorus. And then if I want to solo with that, then I'll just kick on the extra distortion. It'll just give me a little boost.
Cool. Why don't we do I'll just do a little bit of Open the Eyes of My Heart, and we'll start off with a clean, and then a crunch, and then a lead tone. You can hear the difference in how it creates dynamics and energy in the song. So we're stay on the E for a minute. Just start off, listen to the nice clean tone that he has. Nice clean tone. This is over the verse. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see. I want to see. Headed into the chorus, it's going to get bigger. See you high and low. He's got his crunch tone, time. that into a quiet section. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. He's back to his clean now. I want to see. Holy eyes in my heart, Lord. Holy eyes in my heart. I want to see. I want to see. Lord, I want to see. Oh, Lord. The neat thing about what Glenn is doing is, we're about to get into that, is when he plays his part, to me, he's not just taking over. I think it's important, as whether you're an electric guitar player or a piano player or a singer, it's important to realize that we're servants with our instruments. We're servants with our gifts. And it's so easy to just say that, but let that sink down in your heart and just constantly check your own heart and say, man, I want to serve with this. I want to serve what's happening at that particular moment in the service or that particular moment in the song. And there's no room for like some ego trip or like, wow, check out this cool Van Halen lick I just learned yesterday, you know. It's all right to learn all those cool licks, and they're in your toolbox, but it's knowing when to pull those things out. That's the difference to me between a guy like Glenn and guys that are just, you know, their heart is still sort of to like dig me, man. You know, they're still into that rock star thing. So it's all about being a servant, not a celebrity. And, you know, just ask the Lord to cultivate that in you and in your team. Talk about that, preferring one another and serving one another and being sensitive to what's going on. I also like the fact that Glenn doesn't just, you know, play 16 bars of a solo and do every lick he's ever learned, but he thinks about parts and things that will fit into the song and support the song. So that's good. Also, the concept of less is more, which we're going to get into, and I'm just cheating on my notes here. I think that's good. Let's just start talking about finding the right parts that support the song. Ever before, your praises. So I think the most important thing a guitar player needs to do, and a singer, and a parent, is to learn to listen. You know, learning to listen deeply, you know, not just like hear like the intro of the song and go, oh, okay, cool, man, I got it. But like listen to the vibe, listen to the mood of the song, listen to the lyrics if they're available. Check out what the song is saying. You know, it drives me crazy when, you know, I'm all for like taking old hymns and making them more contemporary, but like when you get somebody doing like a, you know, holy, 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 you know, that's weird. Don't you hate that?
I fully hate that.
I hate when that happens. So, you know what I mean? We want to be sensitive. Read the lyrics and go, wow, this is a reverent song. So think reverently with your guitar and effects and come up with things that will create this something that supports the song. So again, I feel like Glenn does that well, whether it's a dark minor chord kind of thing or a real happy kind of up grooving kind of thing. It's knowing what to pull out of your toolbox. You know, you've got all these sounds and ideas in your toolbox, and the idea is to know what thing to pull out at the right time. And so I was just going to ask you, Glenn, sort of what goes through your mind, what process do you go through when you hear a song like this week? We did 10 new songs on an album. You know, what is the process you go through mentally to find the right sound?
Well, it's definitely been trial and error for me because I didn't hear worship music until I was in my 20s. We went to a church that had robes and a pipe organ. And so I didn't think a band even worked in church until I heard worship music like what we were recording this week. So throughout the process, I had to kind of relearn my thinking because worship isn't so much about yourself and your chops and how cool you are and how great you sound and all that stuff. It's about leading people into a more intimate relationship with God, and your purpose being there is to help them do that, and yourself to worship God with your instrument and your gift. So I guess what I started to do was I just kind of listened to the songs, because the songs kind of are a little different than what's going on the radio and stuff like that. And with a band or even a worship leader thing, I'll listen to the song before I'll even attempt to play something. I'll just go, man, what's this song about? What's it saying? What are the lyrics saying? Where the melody going? Should guitar even be in this song? Sometimes I won't even play, you know. I'll just kind of, man, this is awesome.
Good
I
point.
love
You mean
to
there's
worship.
actually times where you don't play?
I'd say more than not.
Isn't that interesting? Just take note of that, guitar players out there. It's okay not to play sometimes.
And if you listen to the rhythm section, if you got a good bass player and a good drummer, a good rhythm section, that's the foundation. And so as a rhythm player, I'm part of the rhythm situation, keyboards, guitar, bass, and drums. I'll kind of listen to what the song is. If it's more of a guitar song, then maybe I'll probably add more guitar parts. If it's a keyboard song, you know, I'll kind of back off. You got to watch the keyboard player, because if he's playing a lot with his left hand, then he's playing really thick stuff in the low end. If that happens, then I'll go to my higher strings. If he's playing sparsely, then I know I can move to a lower register, play bigger chords, more open chords. And same with the acoustic guitar. If he's just kind of strumming lightly, then I know I can bring in a bigger sound. If he's definitely strumming hard, then I know to kind of find a spot and then really listen to the vocal, because the vocals are what people are focusing on when they're worshiping. If it breaks into a spontaneous moment where it's more music and that's what people are going, then you can, you know, you can kind of work with that. So there's nothing to replace listening. But you know, I've also made a lot of mistakes. I've full-on soloed when I shouldn't be, and it's a trial and error thing.
Right. So you've made mistakes, and it's important to have some grace on your guitar player as he's trying to figure this out. But I think when we were talking about sounds earlier, as a worship leader, I think it's important for me to know what sounds are available. You know, so it's kind of neat if you can work with one another, for me to know, you know, because I know some of Glenn's tones as a worship leader, sometimes I can suggest, hey, you know, what about that you know, tone that you do where it's kind of chorused out and it has that swirly thing on it, you know, and he'll go, oh yeah, this, and I'll say, hey, could you maybe do that on the chorus? So I think it's good to know what your electric guitar player has available, and also for the electric guitar player to maybe initiate that. Go to your worship leader and let them know, hey, come and check out my sounds, and I want to make sure that what I'm doing is supporting what you feel like we should be doing as a band. And again, if an electric guitar player has that sort of spiritual and relational attitude, sort of humility to be a servant, and he's not offended if I suggest something to Glenn. I mean, I can't play the stuff that Glenn can play, but I may be able to communicate to him what I heard him do before and say, hey, could you do that thing that you did on that other song? I feel like that would work. And maybe in his mind, you know, he thinks that's a dumb idea, but he doesn't let me know that. Just with humility, he goes, well, okay, but, you know, there's another possibility here, too. And then as a worship leader, I want to be open, too. So there's this kind of preferring one another and coming together and coming up with the best sound.
One thing I thought was great was you brought in CDs, you know, and you said, man, I really like this sound. I think this would work on this song. And it helped me go, yeah, that's a great idea. I might not have thought of that.
Yeah, maybe you might try that as a worship leader. You may hear a song, and we've talked about this in some of our arranging classes, is if you're just starting out learning some of these contemporary songs, try to do it just like the record. Every person learning the part, the guitar guy learning that part, the bass player learning the bass part, keyboard player. Get used to that, listening, and you'll learn about arranging and about not being too busy. And you'll learn, again, the concept, which I think applies here as well, is less is more, right? That sometimes playing as little as possible is the right thing to do. It all depends. So once you've kind of heard the tune and you've kind of, like Glenn said, if he's kind of deciding whether he should be playing up here or down there, let's talk about some of those options that electric guitar player has. You know, there's volume swell possibilities, there's chordal things, there's little, what we call chicken picking, you know, those kind of things. Let's talk about just the chord option. I know that if I'm playing this progression, for example, I'm in this position. Instead of Glenn playing exactly what I'm playing, a lot of times I find that he finds something on the upper string set. Notice he's on the upper string section. He's staying away from the bottom strings because that would make it too muddy, too thick of a sound. Okay, another thing he could do, he could play those chords. Right there, he was arpeggiating those chords. But this time, why don't we try like a volume swell thing? Okay. So instead of actually coming up with a little picking pattern, he can kind of strike the chord and bring it in with the volume. So I'll play the same progression. And that works nice for maybe the intro, maybe the verse while there's singing going on. And now here comes the chorus, and it's going to step on his crunch tone now. Now it's a little bit heavier. Let's end on the C. Now let's say we go back to a verse. He goes back to clean now. Nice. Again, such a dynamic thing going on there, you know. Another thing that I've seen guitar players do a lot is sort of this target note thing, like certain notes that on that volume swell thing. It could be either a chord, but sometimes it might be a note, one note that fits in all those chords. So in this progression, I'm playing a G, a D over F sharp, an E minor 7, and a C2. Well, there's a D right there.